Hey, you're looking cute today. Subscribe for more, and let's dive in.
It all came crashing down in a room that smelled of stale coffee and desperation. The walls were a sterile, unforgiving white, and the mirror in front of me was even more so. It reflected every flaw, every imperfection, with the cold, hard clarity of a surgeon's lamp. I was standing in my boxers, feeling about as small as a 17-year-old guy could feel. The man sitting behind the sleek, minimalist desk didn't even bother to look up from his tablet. He just waved a dismissive hand in my general direction. His name was Arthur Vance, a name that sounded like it belonged on a bottle of expensive cologne, but his demeanor was more like that of a disgruntled DMV employee. "Kid, look," he said, his voice flat and bored. "I'm gonna be straight with you. Save us both some time. You've got a decent face, good jawline, clear skin, but that's where it ends." He finally looked up, his eyes scanning me with the detached air of someone inspecting livestock. "You're what? 5'10", 5'11" on a good day. The industry standard for male models is 6'1", minimum. You don't have the height, and you don't have the frame. You're too slight. It's a no. Next. A no. Just like that. The word hung in the air-conditioned chill of the room. Sharp and final. I felt a hot flush creep up my neck. A wave of shame so intense it felt like a physical blow. I had spent months working out, eating clean, practicing my smoldering look in the bathroom mirror until my mum told me I looked constipated. All for a 2-minute appraisal and a 3-letter rejection. I mumbled a thank you, though I have no idea why. It was pure reflex. I pulled on my jeans and t-shirt, my hands fumbling with the zipper. I didn't dare look in the mirror again. The reflection of the guy who walked in with a spark of hope was gone, replaced by a defeated slump-shouldered kid. I grabbed my worn backpack and walked out of the casting room, past a line of other hopefuls, guys who were all taller, broader, and looked like they'd been carved from marble. I didn't make eye contact with any of them. The city outside felt loud and aggressive. The sounds of taxi horns and sirens that usually filled me with a sense of energy now just felt like noise, grating on my frayed nerves. I walked for blocks without any real destination, the agent's words replaying in my head on a merciless loop. You don't have the height. You don't have the frame. It wasn't fair. I had the passion. I had the drive. I studied fashion magazines like they were textbooks. I knew the designers, the photographers, the top models. I knew I had something. A look. A spark. But I was trapped in a body that didn't meet the ridiculously narrow standards of the industry. Eventually, I found myself slinking into a small coffee shop, the kind with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. I ordered a black coffee I didn't really want and sank into a lumpy armchair in the corner, hoping to just disappear for a while. The rain started to streak down the large front window, blurring the world outside into a watercolor wash of grey. My eyes drifted around the cafe, eventually landing on a large, glossy poster taped to the brick wall. It was an ad for a new perfume. The model was stunning. Of course, she had ethereal-looking features, huge eyes, and a cascade of dark hair. She was leaning against a balcony, the city lights twinkling behind her. And she looked powerful, elegant, and completely in control. I stared at that poster for a long time, the bitterness in my coffee a perfect match for the bitterness in my soul. And then, a thought began to form, a slow, strange realization that pushed through the fog of my self-pity. I looked closer at the model. She wasn't particularly tall. You could tell by her proportions. She was probably 5'7", maybe 5'8" at most. She wasn't rail thin, either. She had soft curves, a feminine shape. Her success wasn't built on a 6-foot-plus frame. It was built on her face, her expression, the aura she projected. The standards for female models were different. They weren't necessarily easier, but they were broader. They valued a unique look, a captivating presence, and a certain artistic quality over raw physical stats. A woman could be 5'7" and a superstar. A man who was 5'10" was, as Arthur Vance had so kindly put it, a no. The unfairness of it all churned in my gut. And then, another memory surfaced, pushing its way through years of teenage self-consciousness. It was from when I was maybe 8 years old. My older sister, Chloe, was going through a phase where she was obsessed with makeovers. I was her favorite, and only, test subject. One rainy Saturday, she sat me down in front of her vanity mirror, the one with the little light bulbs around it, and went to work. She had tied my shaggy brown hair back with a scarf, applied a shimmery, glittery eyeshadow that I remember being fascinated by, and painted my lips with a sticky, cherry-flavored gloss. The final touch was one of her old dance recital dresses, a fluffy pink thing that was way too big for me. We were just playing, a silly game of dress-up. But I remember looking in the mirror at this strange little kid with big eyes and rosy cheeks, and thinking, it didn't look bad. I didn't look like a boy in a dress. I looked like a little girl, a surprisingly pretty one. At that, Chloe had squealed with delight, telling me I had better cheekbones than she did. The memory, once embarrassing to recall, now felt different. It was a data point, a piece of evidence. I looked from my own reflection in the dark cafe window back to the poster of the model. I saw her delicate features, her soft expression. Then I looked at my own reflection again, trying to see past the dejection. I had my mum's finer bone structure. I didn't have a heavy, square jaw. My eyes were large. My lips were fuller than most guys. I was slight, as the agent had said. A thought, so wild and audacious, it almost made me laugh out loud, sparked in my brain. It was like a lightning strike, illuminating a path I had never, ever considered. If I can't make it as a man. The thought trailed off, too crazy to complete. But it wouldn't go away. It circled back, more insistent this time. The standards are different. It's about the look, the aura, not the height. My heart started beating faster, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. It was a mix of terror and a bizarre, thrilling excitement. I took a shaky sip of my now cold coffee. What if? The thought finally completed itself, the words echoing in the silent auditorium of my mind. What if I became a girl? The idea was insane. It was impossible. It was a lie. But it was also the first flicker of hope I'd felt all day. The subway ride home was a blur. The crazy idea bounced around in my skull, refusing to be dismissed, with every clack of the train wheels on the track. It seemed to gain momentum, transforming from a ridiculous fantasy into a tangible, albeit terrifying, plan. By the time I walked through the door of our small apartment, my nerves were shot. But my resolve had hardened into something solid. My mom, Sarah, was in the kitchen, humming along to an old Motown song on the radio while she chopped vegetables for dinner. She was the kind of mom who always seemed to be in motion. She had a warmth that filled our little home, a constant, reassuring presence in my life ever since my dad left when I was a kid. She looked up as I came in, her smile faltering when she saw my face. A mother's intuition is a powerful thing. "Oh, honey, it didn't go well, did it?" she asked, putting the knife down and wiping her hands on a dish towel. I just shook my head, unable to speak. She didn't press. She just came over and wrapped me in a hug. She smelled like onions and her signature lavender hand soap. I leaned into her, letting myself be a kid for a moment, letting the sting of rejection wash over me. It's their loss. Hayden, she said softly, rubbing my back. They're fools if they can't see what you have. We stood there for a minute before I finally pulled away, taking a deep breath. It's not just them. Mom, it'll be all of them. He said, I don't have the height. It's a rule, a non-negotiable one. She sighed, her expression a mixture of anger and sadness. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's just the way it is, I said, my voice flat. We moved to the small living room and sat on the worn floral sofa that had been with us for as long as I could remember. I knew this was my moment. It was now or never. If I let the fear win, the idea would die right here on this couch. My heart hammered against my ribs like it wanted out. Mum, I started, my voice barely a whisper. I have an idea, and it's going to sound completely insane, but I need you to just hear me out. Please. She looked at me, her brow furrowed with concern. Of course. Honey, what is it? I took another breath, forcing the words out. What if I tried to make it as a female model? The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was the faint sizzle of the radio from the kitchen. Mom just stared at me. Her expression cycled through a whole series of emotions in about 5 seconds: confusion, disbelief, a flicker of alarm, and then back to utter confusion. Is this a joke? She asked, her voice cautious. Are you trying to tell me something else, Hayden, about who you are? I shook my head quickly. No, it's not that. I mean, I don't think it is. This is a strategy, a plan. Look, I leaned forward, my desperation making me more articulate. The agent was right. As a guy, I'm a non-starter. I'm too short. But for women, the standards are different. It's about the face, the look. You've always said I have delicate features. Chloe used to dress me up and I didn't look ridiculous. I think I could actually pull it off. I watched her face, praying she wouldn't laugh or call me crazy. She was processing it. I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. She wasn't dismissing it outright. You want to pretend to be a girl to get modeling jobs, she clarified, her voice still laced with disbelief. Yes, I said, the single word filled with all the hope and fear I was feeling. Just to get a foot in the door, to prove that I can do it. She was quiet for a long time, just looking at me. I could see the conflict in her eyes. The maternal instinct to protect me from ridicule and failure was at war with the part of her that had always encouraged me to chase my dreams, no matter how unconventional. Then, a strange, thoughtful look crossed her face. A memory was stirring. You know, she began slowly. This reminds me of someone. My old friend from community college. Susan Miller. I had a vague recollection of the name. A friend she'd lost touch with, but sometimes mentioned. Susan was always into theatrical stuff. Mom continued, a small smile playing on her lips. She was a makeup artist. Not for, weddings and proms. She did stage makeup. She worked with theater groups, indie films, and for a while, she was the go-to makeup artist for some of the biggest drag shows in the city. She knew all the tricks, how to create illusions, how to transform a face, a body. My heart leaped. This was it. This was the key. Is she Still around? Do you know how to find her? Mom nodded, a new energy in her expression. The initial shock was fading, replaced by a kind of conspiratorial excitement. It was the same look she got when she decided we were going to repaint the entire apartment in one weekend. I think I can find her. She had a little studio in the East Village. If anyone could help you with this insane idea, it would be her. She looked at me, her eyes serious now, but with a definite spark in them. Okay. Hayden, this is what we're going to do. I'll call Susan. We'll set up a meeting. We'll treat this like a secret project. Just the three of us. We'll do a test run, a full transformation, and if it works, if you can really look like a convincing girl, then we'll see about the next step. But if at any point it feels wrong, or if you want to stop, we stop. No questions asked. Deal. I could have cried with relief. I just nodded. Speechless. Deal. I finally managed to say. She squeezed my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. All right then, she said, standing up and heading back toward the kitchen. Let's make this happen. But first, dinner. Even aspiring female models have to eat. That night, I barely slept. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but for the first time, it was overshadowed by a thrilling, terrifying hope. We had a plan. We had an ally. Our secret project had officially begun. A few days later, I found myself standing outside a nondescript door on the second floor of a walk-up building in the East Village. The air in the hallway smelled of incense and old wood. Mom had managed to track down Susan, who, to her surprise, and my immense relief, was not only still in the business, but was thrilled to hear from an old friend. She had been intrigued, to say the least, by my mum's vague explanation of our art project. Mum gave my hand a reassuring squeeze before knocking. The door swung open almost immediately, and a woman with a shock of spiky magenta-colored hair and heavy-rimmed black glasses beamed at us. She was probably my mum's age, but she radiated an ageless, bohemian energy. Sarah! Oh my God, look at you! You haven't changed a bit, she exclaimed, pulling my mum into a hug. Then her bright, intelligent eyes landed on me. And you must be Hayden. Come on in. You too. Welcome to my laboratory. Susan's studio was exactly what I had hoped it would be. It wasn't a salon. It was a creative's paradise. One wall was lined with shelves overflowing with jars of pigments, tubes of paint, and palettes of every color imaginable. Another wall was covered in foam heads, each sporting a different wig, long, short, blonde, brunette, even a shocking electric blue one. There were dress forms draped in shimmering fabrics, boxes of feathers and rhinestones, and a large, well-lit vanity mirror that looked like it belonged backstage at a Broadway show. Susan was all business, but in the most friendly and disarming way. She had me sit in the chair in front of the mirror, and she circled me, studying my face and frame with a professional, practiced eye. There was no judgment, just analysis. Okay, she said, tapping her chin. Sarah wasn't kidding. You've got a great facial structure to work with. Good bones. And your frame, what that idiot agent called slight, is actually a blessing for what we're trying to do. It's easier to build up than to pare down. She clapped her hands together. All right, Project Holly begins now. Holly, I asked, my voice cracking slightly. Every good creation needs a name, she said with a grin. You don't look like a Tiffany or a Jessica. Holly, it sounds fresh, a little sweet, a little mysterious. Do you like it? I nodded. Holly. It felt strange, like a costume I hadn't put on yet. Good. Now, the first step is the least glamorous, but the most important, she announced, pulling on a pair of latex gloves. We need a blank canvas, and that means getting rid of all this. She gestured to the light dusting of hair on my arms and legs. And your chest. We're going for total smoothness. Have you ever been waxed before? I shook my head, a sense of dread pooling in my stomach. Well, she said, her eyes twinkling. There's a first time for everything. What followed was an hour of what I can only describe as refined torture. Susan was a pro, quick and efficient, but that didn't make it any less painful. She would smooth a strip of warm, honey-scented wax onto a section of my skin, press a cloth strip over it, and then, with a cheerful ready, she'd rip it away. Each pull was a sharp, searing sting that made my eyes water. My legs, my arms, even the smattering of hair on my chest. I clenched my jaw, focusing on my breathing, trying not to yelp. My mom sat in a chair in the corner, wincing in sympathy with every rip. But then, after the initial sting faded, something amazing happened. I ran my hand over my calf, and the skin was impossibly smooth. It was a sensation I had never felt on my own body before. It was like touching someone else's skin. It felt feminine. The pain had been a necessary evil, a rite of passage. As I looked at my now smooth, slightly pink limbs, I felt less like Hayden and more like a blank slate, ready to be painted. See, Susan said, noticing my expression. Pain is temporary. Fabulous is forever. Now for the foundation. She didn't mean makeup. Not yet. She handed me 2 garments that I stared at with a mixture of terror and fascination. One was a pair of specialized panties made of a thick, stretchy material. It's called a gaff. She explained matter-of-factly. It's designed to create a smooth, flat front. Tucking is an art form. My dear, and this is your best tool. The other item was a simple, soft cup bra. No underwire, no lace. Just a plain beige piece of fabric. Putting them on in the small adjoining bathroom was one of the strangest experiences of my life. The gaff was tight, constricting, and forced me to arrange myself in a way that felt completely alien. It was uncomfortable, but it worked. When I looked in the mirror, the masculine bulge was gone, replaced by a flat, seamless line. The bra was less intimidating, but still odd. The straps felt strange on my shoulders, the band tight around my ribs. When I came out, I felt reshaped. My body's geography had been fundamentally altered. Now came the part I was most nervous about. The chest. Susan opened a box and carefully lifted out 2 teardrop-shaped pieces of silicone. They were soft and squishy, with a surprising weight to them. They felt cool and slightly sticky to the touch. Medical-grade silicone breast forms, she announced. The good stuff. They feel and move like the real thing. She showed me how to apply the special body-safe adhesive to the back, and then, with her guidance, I pressed them onto my chest, just below my collarbones. The moment they were in place, everything changed. First, the weight. It wasn't heavy, exactly, but it was present, a gentle, persistent pressure on my chest that I had never experienced. It instantly changed my posture. My shoulders, which I usually held slightly hunched, naturally pulled back to counterbalance the new weight on my front. My center of gravity had shifted. I looked in the mirror, and for the first time, I saw the distinct silhouette of a woman. Under my t-shirt, there was now a soft, curved C-cup bust. It was surreal. I put my hands over them, feeling the soft give of the silicone through the fabric of my shirt and bra. It was the most profound illusion yet. It wasn't just a visual trick. It was a physical one. I felt different. A part of my brain was already adapting to this new shape, this new weight. "Whoa," I breathed out. "Whoa is right," Susan said, smiling. "Now for the face." She sat me back down in the vanity chair. First came a tight-fitting mesh wig cap that flattened my own hair against my scalp. It was itchy and uncomfortable, but necessary. Then, she chose a wig from one of the foam heads. It was a beautiful, shoulder-length style, in a warm chestnut brown, with a soft, side-swept bang. She settled it carefully on my head, adjusting it until it sat perfectly on my hairline. The transformation was startling. The long hair instantly softened the angles of my jaw and forehead. It framed my face in a way that was undeniably feminine. I stared at the stranger in the mirror, whose eyes were my own, but whose everything else was rapidly changing. Then, the makeup began. Susan was an artist, with a dizzying array of brushes, sponges, and colors. She systematically erased Hayden and sculpted Holly. A layer of foundation evened out my skin tone, hiding any hint of razor stubble on my upper lip and jaw. She used different shades of contouring powder and cream with surgical precision, slimming my nose, softening my jawline, and creating the illusion of higher, fuller cheekbones. "The eyes are the key," she murmured, more to herself than to me. She used a delicate brush to apply a taupe eyeshadow, blending it into the crease to create depth. Then came the eyeliner, a thin, black line, expertly winged out at the corners. It was a tiny detail, but it dramatically changed the shape of my eyes, making them look wider, more almond-shaped, more feminine. A few coats of mascara on my lashes, and my eyes suddenly looked huge and expressive. She filled in my eyebrows, giving them a softer, more elegant arch, and finished with a swipe of a neutral, rosy pink lipstick. When she was done, she stood back, a proud smile on her face. "Okay. Holly, open your eyes." I had kept them closed for the final touches. I took a breath and opened them. I didn't recognize myself. The person staring back at me from the mirror was not Hayden. It was a girl. A pretty girl. She had my eyes. Yes, but they were framed differently. Her face was softer, her features more delicate. The long brown hair cascaded around her shoulders, and the soft curves of her chest were visible under my t-shirt. It was Holly. She was real. The final step was the clothes. My mum had brought a simple, elegant dress she'd bought for the occasion. It was a deep, wine red color, a sleeveless sheath dress that ended just above the knee. The fabric was a soft, stretchy knit that would hug the new curves Susan had created. Changing into it was another revelation. The dress skimmed over my new figure, the fabric clinging to the silicone breasts and gliding over my hips, paired with a pair of sheer, nude pantyhose. The illusion was nearly complete. My legs looked long and sleek. The last piece of the puzzle was the shoes. Susan produced a pair of simple black pumps with a modest 2-inch heel. "We'll start you off easy," she said. I'd never imagined how difficult walking in heels would be. The moment I stood up, I wobbled like a newborn fawn. My weight was pitched forward onto the balls of my feet, and my ankles felt like they were made of jelly. Small steps. Susan coached, holding my arm for balance, and keep your knees closer together when you walk. It's a completely different gait. Don't stomp. Glide. Think of a string pulling you up from the top of your head. She and my mum watched as I took tentative, awkward steps across the studio. It was clumsy at first. I felt like an imposter, a fraud. But then I caught my reflection in a full-length mirror. I saw Holly, in her red dress and heels, looking a bit unsteady, but undeniably like a young woman. Seeing her motivated me. I took a deep breath, remembered Susan's advice, and tried again. I focused on my posture, on keeping my steps small and my movements deliberate. After about 15 minutes of practice, something started to click. The wobbling lessened. I found a rhythm. I started to understand how to carry the new weight, how to move in this reshaped body. I walked from one end of the studio to the other, turned, and walked back. I wasn't perfect, but I was no longer clumsy. I was beginning to inhabit the role. Then Susan taught me about my voice. Your normal speaking voice is in your chest, she explained. You need to bring it up, into your head. Don't try to do a fake, high-pitched squeak. Just aim for the higher end of your natural register and soften the ends of your sentences. Let your pitch rise slightly at the end of a question. I practiced. Hello, my name is Holly. The first time, it came out as my normal voice, and it sounded jarringly masculine coming from the girl in the mirror. Again, Susan prompted, softer, higher. Hello. My name is Holly. I tried again. My voice lighter, with the slight upward inflection she'd described. It was better. It sounded like a young woman's voice, maybe a little low, but believable. We practiced for another hour. Walking, talking, sitting, standing. How to sit with my knees together. How to gesture with my hands more delicately. It was a complete performance, a study in a new kind of physicality. Finally, Susan clapped her hands. I think she's ready. She turned me to face my mom, who had been watching the whole process with a wide, stunned expression. She looked at me, her eyes scanning me from the tips of my heeled shoes to the top of my perfectly coiffed wig. Her own eyes filled with tears. Hayden, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I smiled, remembering to keep it gentle, not a wide, boyish grin. It's Holly, Mom, I said, my voice soft and practiced. She let out a little gasp, covering her mouth with her hand. My God, she said, her voice shaking. I don't see you. I mean, I know it's you, but I see a beautiful young woman, a stranger. That was the moment I knew it could work. If I could fool my own mother, the woman who had known me every second of my life, then I could fool anyone. Okay, Susan said, grabbing a professional-looking camera. Let's get this girl a portfolio. For the next hour, I posed. Susan directed me, showing me how to angle my body, where to put my hands, how to tilt my head. With every click of the shutter, my confidence grew. I wasn't Hayden playing dress-up anymore. I was Holly, a model. I felt the part, the red dress, the weight on my chest, the feel of the wig on my shoulders. It all came together to create a persona that I slipped into like a second skin. Later that evening, sitting at our own kitchen table, Mum and I uploaded the best photos to a new, anonymous email account. We filled out online submission forms for a dozen different modeling agencies, the smaller, boutique ones that were more likely to take a chance on a new face. Under name, we typed Holly Kent. Under age, we typed 18. Under height, we typed 5'7". We attached the portfolio a collection of shots where Holly looked confident, ethereal, and captivating. With a deep breath and a silent prayer, I clicked send on the first application, and then the next, and the next. The work was done. Now, all we could do was wait. The next 2 days were some of the longest of my life. I went back to being Hayden, wearing my usual jeans and hoodies, but everything felt different. I was acutely aware of my smooth skin under my clothes, I found myself subconsciously trying to walk with smaller steps. I was living in a strange limbo, a boy on the outside, but with the ghost of a girl living under my skin. On the third morning, my phone buzzed. It was an email. The subject line read, "Casting call invitation, visionary models." My heart stopped. With trembling hands, I opened it. "Dear Holly," it began. "We were very impressed with your submission. Your look is fresh and compelling. We would like to invite you to a casting call at our studio tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. Please come prepared to walk for us." I read it 3 times, just to make sure it was real. Mum was looking over my shoulder, and she let out a whoop of joy that made me jump. "You did it!" she cried, hugging me so tight I could barely breathe. "They want you. They want Holly." I was in shock. A dizzying, euphoric shock. It had actually worked. Just 2 days after sending out her portfolio, Holly had a real audition. An agency wanted to see her. Tomorrow, at 2 p.m., the secret project was about to step into the real world. The morning of the audition. Our apartment was buzzing with a nervous energy that felt like static electricity. I was a wreck, my stomach doing gymnastics. This wasn't a dress rehearsal in the safety of Susan's studio anymore. This was real. These were professionals who looked at faces and bodies for a living. They could spot a fake a mile away. Mum called Susan, who acted as our remote mission commander. "Deep breaths. Holly," she said over the speakerphone, her voice a calming balm. "Remember everything we practiced. You aren't Hayden trying to be a girl. You are Holly. From the moment the wig goes on until the moment it comes off. That's who you are. Own it." The transformation process was faster this time, more practiced. The waxing was already done. So we skipped the painful part. I showered, making sure my skin was perfectly smooth. Then came the foundation garments, the gaff, the bra. They felt less strange now, more like a uniform. I carefully attached the breast forms, the familiar weight settling onto my chest. It felt less like a costume piece and more like a part of me. Mum helped with the wig, making sure every strand was perfectly in place. I sat at my own small desk, which we'd converted into a makeshift vanity, and began the makeup. My hands were shaking at first, but I followed the steps Susan had drilled into me. Foundation, contour, eyes, lips. I was slower than Susan, more methodical. But, as Holly's face began to emerge in the mirror, my confidence grew. With the final swipe of mascara, Hayden was gone. The nervous boy was replaced by a girl with wide, determined eyes. For the audition, we had chosen a simple but chic outfit. A pair of well-fitting, dark-wash skinny jeans, a simple black silk camisole, and a tailored grey blazer. It was professional, but still showed off my figure. And, of course, the heels. This time, they were a slightly higher 3-inch pump in a nude color to elongate my legs. I had spent hours practicing walking in them up and down our apartment hallway until the movement felt second nature. When I was fully dressed, I stood in front of the full-length mirror on the back of my bedroom door. It was Holly who stared back at me. She looked nervous, but she also looked ready. "You look amazing. Honey," Mum said, her voice soft with awe. She handed me a simple black leather purse. "Your wallet's in there, with a little cash, and your phone. Remember to keep it on silent." The subway ride to the agency's studio in Soho was the first true test, being Holly in public. I was terrified. I kept my head down, focusing on my breathing, convinced that everyone was staring, that they knew my secret. I could feel their eyes on me. A man on the train smiled at me. A quick, polite glance. My first instinct was to flinch, but then I realized he wasn't looking at me with suspicion. He was looking at a pretty girl. The realization sent a strange jolt through me, a mix of fear and a weird, unexpected thrill. Visionary Models was located in a trendy loft building with polished concrete floors and huge windows. The waiting room was exactly what I'd expected: sleek, modern, and intimidating. It was filled with about a dozen other girls, all of them impossibly beautiful and impossibly thin. They sat scrolling on their phones, projecting an air of bored indifference that I knew was a mask for the same kind of gut-wrenching nerves I was feeling. I checked in with the receptionist, giving my name as Holly Kent in the softest, steadiest voice I could manage. She gave me a number 27 and told me to have a seat. I found an empty chair in the corner and tried to mimic the other girls, pulling out my phone and pretending to be busy. But I was hyper-aware of everything. The way the other girls were dressed, the way they held themselves. I felt like a fraud, a spy in the house of beauty. I could feel sweat trickling down my back, and I prayed my makeup wouldn't melt. "Number 27, Holly Kent," a voice called out. My head snapped up. A chic woman with a sharp black bob and an iPad stood in the doorway. It was my turn. My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. I stood up, my legs feeling a little shaky in the heels, and followed her. The casting room was bright and white, just like the last one. But the atmosphere felt different, more creative, less corporate. Two people sat behind a long table, a man with a kind, weathered face and a trendy haircut, and a woman who looked sharp and intelligent, probably the one who had sent the email. "Hi, Holly, I'm Jessica," the woman said with a warm smile, "and this is Marco, our head of development. Thanks for coming in." "It's nice to meet you," I said, my practiced voice coming out smoother than I expected. "We loved your photos," Marco said, his eyes scanning my face. "You have a very unique, almost haunting look. Very pre-Raphaelite. Do you have a portfolio book with you?" My blood ran cold. A book. We hadn't prepared a physical book. Susan's photos were all digital. No, I'm sorry," I stammered, my voice faltering for the first time. "Everything I have is digital. This is my first time doing this. Officially. I decided honesty was the best policy. It fit the fresh new face narrative." Jessica smiled reassuringly. "That's perfectly fine. We like new faces. So, tell us a little about yourself. Holly, where are you from?" I stuck to the script Mum and I had rehearsed. "I'm from Queens. I just turned 18 and graduated high school. I've always been passionate about fashion and art, and people have always told me I should try modeling. So, I thought, I'd finally give it a shot. It was all true, just from a different perspective." They asked a few more simple questions, and I answered them as calmly as I could, focusing on keeping my voice soft and my posture straight. Then came the moment I'd been dreading. "Okay, Holly," Marco said, leaning back in his chair. "We'd like to see your walk." He gestured to the length of the polished concrete floor. This was it. The main event. All my practice in the apartment hallway came down to this. I walked to the far end of the room, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against the silicone of my chest. I took a deep breath, picturing Susan's face. Chin up. Glide. "You are Holly." I turned and started to walk toward them. I focused on a spot on the wall just behind their heads. I let my hips sway just enough. The way Susan had taught me. A natural result of walking in heels with my knees closer together. I kept my expression neutral but confident, my eyes forward. Step, step, step. The click of my heels on the concrete was the only sound in the room. I reached the table, paused for a beat, turned with what I hoped was a fluid motion. and walked back. When I returned to my starting point, I turned to face them again, my heart in my throat. Jessica and Marco were whispering to each other, looking at Marco's laptop where my photos were displayed. The silence stretched on for an eternity. I was sure I had failed. My walk was too stiff, or too clumsy. They saw through the makeup. They knew. Finally, Jessica looked up, a bright, decisive smile on her face. "Holly," she said, her voice filled with a genuine excitement that sent a shockwave through me. "We don't normally do this on a first meeting. We usually have a callback. Discuss with the team. But Marco and I are in agreement. We think you have something truly special." Marco nodded, his expression serious. "Your look is exactly what we're searching for right now. It's unique. It's memorable. We want to sign you. Today." I stared at them, completely stunned. My brain couldn't process the words. "Sign me today," I thought I had misheard. You do was all I could manage to squeak out. "Yes," Jessica said, already pulling a sheaf of papers from a folder. "This is our standard new talent contract. It's an exclusive 3-year deal. We want to start developing your book immediately, send you to test shoots, get you ready for Fashion Week castings in the fall." She pushed the contract across the table toward me. "Take your time to look it over. Of course, you can take it home to review with your parents if you like." My mind was reeling. I was floating. A wave of pure, unadulterated euphoria washed over me. So powerful, it almost made me dizzy. I did it. Holly did it. We did it. The insane plan, the secret project, had worked beyond my wildest dreams. I looked down at the contract, at the line, waiting for a signature. I thought about taking it home, but I knew I couldn't. This moment was too charged, too perfect. I had to seize it. "I'd like to sign it now," I said, my voice filled with a newfound confidence. Jessica raised an eyebrow, looking impressed. She pushed a pen across the table. I picked it up. My hand was steady now. I looked at the line that said, "Model's signature." For a split second, my muscle memory almost formed the letter H for Hayden. I stopped, took a breath, and then, with a smooth, deliberate flourish, I signed the name that had been a fantasy just a week ago. Holly Kent. As I lifted the pen, I felt a profound sense of victory, so sharp and sweet it was almost painful. I had walked into that other agency as Hayden and been dismissed in minutes. I walked in here as Holly and was offered a contract on the spot. I was so caught up in the moment, so overwhelmed with elation, that I barely registered the rest of the meeting. They gave me a copy of the contract and a schedule for my first test shoot later in the week. I shook their hands, thanked them profusely, and walked out of the room in a daze. I floated out of the agency, past the same waiting room of beautiful girls, and out into the bright afternoon sun of New York City. The world looked different, sharper, more vibrant. I had won. That evening was a celebration. Mum cooked my favorite meal, lasagna, and even opened a bottle of sparkling apple cider. Susan came over, and we all sat around our small dining table, giddy with success. I was still in full Holly mode. I hadn't wanted to take any of it off yet. It felt too good, too victorious. We recounted every detail of the audition. Mum and Susan hung on every word, cheering at the right parts, their faces beaming with pride, looking at them, at their genuine happiness for me. I felt a surge of love and gratitude so strong it almost brought me to tears. This wasn't just my victory, it was ours. "I knew you could do it," Susan said, raising her glass of cider. "To Holly Kent, the city's next big thing." "To Holly," my mom echoed, her eyes shining. We toasted, and the clink of our glasses felt like the most satisfying sound in the world. It wasn't until late that night, after Susan had gone home and Mum had gone to bed, that I was alone. The apartment was quiet. I walked into my bedroom and stood in front of the mirror, still fully dressed as Holly. The high of the victory was beginning to fade, replaced by a quieter, more complex set of emotions. I looked at Holly's reflection. She was a success. She had a contract. She had a future. She had everything Hayden had wanted but couldn't get. Slowly, I began the process of detransformation. It felt different this time. It wasn't just taking off a costume. It felt like shedding a skin. I took off the blazer, the camisole, the jeans. I peeled off the pantyhose. I sat on the edge of my bed and unstrapped the heels, my feet aching with a dull, unfamiliar throb. Then I went into the bathroom. I looked at Holly's face in the mirror one last time before I took a cotton pad soaked in makeup remover and began to wipe her away. With each swipe, the illusion dissolved. The soft cheekbones sharpened back into my own. The winged eyeliner disappeared, making my eyes look smaller, plainer. The rosy lipstick came off, revealing my own pale lips. When I was done, Hayden's face stared back at me, looking tired and shockingly unfamiliar. I reached up and carefully lifted off the wig. My own flattened. Sweaty hair sprang up. The change was jarring, without the soft frame of Holly's hair. My face seemed harsher, more angular. The last step was the most significant. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror and reached under my plain white t-shirt. I carefully peeled the silicone forms from my chest. The adhesive made a soft, tearing sound as it released from my skin. I held them in my hands for a moment, feeling their weight, before setting them on my dresser. And then, a sensation so strange and profound washed over me that I had to sit down on my bed. The physical weight was gone. My chest was flat again, but the feeling, the phantom sensation of them was still there. I could still feel a ghost of that gentle pressure, that shift in my center of gravity. My brain had started to accept it as a part of me, and now it was confused by its absence. I unconsciously brought a hand to my flat chest, half expecting to feel the soft curve, and was startled by the familiar feel of my own pectoral muscle and bone. I looked at my reflection. It was just me, Hayden, the same guy who had been so cruelly rejected just over a week ago. But I didn't feel like him anymore. Something had fundamentally shifted inside me. The plan had been a means to an end. A clever, desperate trick to get my foot in the door of an industry that had slammed it in my face. But sitting there, in the quiet of my room, I had to admit a truth that was both terrifying and exhilarating. I had liked it. I hadn't just liked the success, the contract, the victory. I had liked being Holly. I liked the way the clothes felt on my reshaped body. I liked the soft weight of the wig on my shoulders. I liked the way people looked at me on the street, not with suspicion, but with appreciation. I liked the power in that gaze. I liked the feeling of being seen as beautiful. As Hayden, I felt invisible, inadequate. As Holly, I felt confident, captivating. I had more power and presence in 3-inch heels and a wig than I had ever felt in my own skin. A part of me, a deep and undeniable part, had started to enjoy the feeling of being a girl. It wasn't just a role I was playing anymore. It felt right. I stood up and walked back to the mirror, looking at my own reflection. Hayden, the boy who had started this journey. But he wasn't the one who had signed that contract. He wasn't the one they wanted to see at the test shoot. They wanted Holly. A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't Hayden's tired, uncertain smile. It was a little more confident, a little more knowing. It was a smile that held a secret. I leaned in closer to the mirror, my eyes meeting my own reflection. The line between Hayden and Holly, once so clear, was beginning to blur. And in that moment, I knew I didn't want to find it again. Not yet. I whispered to the boy in the glass, a promise to myself and to the girl I was becoming. Tomorrow, I'll be back, and everyone will only know Holly.